the fundamental problem is people are really running out of patience. We've had years of promises from successive governments of getting to grips with this, and we don't see any evidence of it happening.
No, and this is it, Catherine. It's continuing on, isn't it? And we're going to discuss this further now because I'm joined by barrister and writer Stephen Barrett. Stephen, pleasure to have you on the show. What is the... I mean, I guess maybe let's get into the technicalities because you're a man who understands the law far better than I do. But what happens now the government has appealed? What's next? What should people brace themselves for?
So, first of all, I really want your listeners and viewers to understand the absolute mess, the absolute car crash that Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, has made of this entire affair. So the government is not currently a party to the case. That's if they're so desperate now that they want to appeal this case, then that's a total admission of failure. That's making incompetent people look gifted. So they should have, if they wanted to be involved in this case, they should have been a party and made themselves a party. As far as I can tell, they sort of turned up on the day and desperately tried to beg the judge's mercy, which again is pretty embarrassing in His Majesty's government. Now, they weren't made parties to the case, and I can confirm that for listeners and viewers. I was talking quite casually to a friend and trying to get what we call counsel's note because I assumed there wouldn't be a written judgment. But what this judge did is after he had the hearing on the Friday, he quite clearly worked the entire weekend, and he has written a 120-paragraph judgment. Now, I don't think that's normal in an interim injunction case, so he clearly knew something was going to come to challenge him, and it's an extremely well-reasoned judgment. It's actually quite compassionate. It recognises that the government has obligations towards migrants in law, which is true, and I tell you what, the hinge point that I want you to all listeners and viewers to get, Alex, is that there are 2 migrant hotels in Epping, in that district. 2, not 1, 2. And the locals, the good, decent locals, are protesting one of the hotels. They're not protesting the other hotel. And that's a hinge point in the case. It's a really determinative point. The judge points this out. They are protesting the Bell Hotel because the Bell Hotel is a threat to them. And that's because of the 3 arrests in a very short period of time. I'm not going to name the other one because I don't want to be accused of being salacious. And the judge doesn't name it in his judgment. But we all recognise that there is a second hotel that nobody is protesting. So what the government is now coming in at the last minute, having completely messed up the first hearing, is throwing itself on the mercy of the court to fix a problem that it should have known about. It's got plenty of time to solve. I mean, Alex, what if we got invaded by Russia tomorrow? Dan Jarvis could not go on the media and say, well, we will deal with Russia by the end of the parliament. I mean, that's just not on. It's just not on. So I think... Sorry. Yeah,
Stephen, of course, the government would argue that they'd be very prepared for an invasion of Russia. They would argue that they're up to their eyeballs in MOD and they're trying to increase the defence spending, of course. That's what they would argue, Stephen. But let's stay on this topic here on these asylum hotels, because, of course, this comes down to a technicality, doesn't it? That the fact this case was able to go forward in the first place, which is that these hotels' use case has changed. Now, that is the law, that cannot happen, which is why this case has been won so far. And how are the government able to challenge that? Because if that's the case up and down the country, surely they've missed it's a big problem for them. But how are they able to challenge that underneath the law? Are they able to say, well, actually, we haven't got any other option, and therefore you must allow us to do this? What is the premise of their argument, Stephen?
Well, they're not a party to the case, so I don't understand why they think they've got a right to appeal. They will have to beg that from the Court of Appeal. If I was the Court of Appeal, I might tell them to trot on, quite frankly. They've got much bigger problems than this one injunction, so this is all rather symbolic nonsense. Because if you read the case, the judge explains quite clearly, councils have 4 years from when a hotel is filled with migrants. So take the migrant hotel down in Canary Wharf, which has only just been filled with migrants. That council has 4 years in which it can serve a stop notice. It doesn't need a court injunction. It can just shut the hotel down tomorrow. And I think councils across the land are going to come to this realisation. I'm working with a group called Lawyers for Borders, which is set up by Robert Jenrick. And, we're trying, and other good people are trying to help. And this is not party political at all. Nobody wants to have a dangerous hotel anywhere near them, and nothing crystallises that more than the good people of Essex, who say that hotel is not dangerous, so they don't protest it. This hotel is dangerous, so they do. And that's the fundamental. And our government is at war with maths, Alex. You know, fundamentally. And that comes, I don't want to bore your listeners and viewers, but that comes from the way that they were educated. They really are subjectivists. They think that there is no objective reality and that everything can just be changed by words and altering perception. But you can't. You literally can't go to war with maths. You can't go to war with objective reality. Ultimately, there are X number of hotel rooms. Ultimately, there are X number of HMO rooms. Ultimately, there are X number of buildings in this country. Ultimately, there's X number of tents. And then the migrants keep coming at this utterly ridiculous rate that they are now coming at. All of those numbers are going to be breached. And Dan Jarvis can't just sit there and say, well, by the end of the Parliament, we'll probably have done something. I mean, that's also, I want your listeners and viewers to know that that's quite an arrogant statement, Alex, because Parliament could collapse tomorrow. It doesn't have a divine right to last for another few years.
Well, that's absolutely how democracy works, Stephen, of course. I mean, again, just to give some balance here, the government would argue that not all these hotels are dangerous and that we need to have a balanced approach. But that's what they would argue. I'm sure many people on the left would also argue that there are many safe migrant hotels and not all of them are dangerous. But Stephen, I want to move on to this lawyers for borders, not without borders. I think you want lawyers for borders, and what the purpose of that is, and what are you organising? What are you trying to achieve?
Well, it's getting back this idea that there is such a thing as objective reality, that this subjectivism, this what we call postmodernism that our leaders are steeped in is just nonsense. But David Starkey told me that Dr. Johnson dealt with this problem by simply kicking a stone. And I've often, when people go into this subjective nonsense, I encourage them to run headfirst at a wall. And I tell them the wall is just subjective, so you'll probably be fine. We need to restore objective reality. On borders, my clothes are a border. You know, we take off our clothes to be intimate with individuals, as adults choose, but they are a border to other adults so that we don't do that. My front door with a lock on it is a border. And we need to restore our borders. In the first instance, what Lawyers for Borders is going to do is help councils. That's the obvious low-hanging fruit. It'll be encouraging them to issue these stop notices and encouraging those who can't do that to go to court like Epping have.
Okay, Stephen Barrett,
we will then evolve.
Stephen, thank you so much for joining me. Brilliant as ever. Stephen Barrett, barrister and writer there. Well, I'm just going to read a writer's reply from the government here. Earlier this afternoon, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper released the following statement. This government inherited an asylum system in chaos, with decision-making at a standstill, the backlog soaring and tens of thousands of asylum seekers staying in expensive asylum hotels with no prospect of their case being resolved. As set out in our manifesto, this government will end the asylum hotels and bring the number of people in the asylum accommodation system right back down. We have already taken immediate action to start fixing the broken asylum system we inherited, doubling the rate of asylum decision-making, increasing the removal of failed asylum seekers by almost 30%, and taking action to prevent overseas workers and students claiming UK asylum when their visas expire. Well, there you have it.